3, 2, 1. Quorum Radio, baby. Today I've got on a very, very remarkable guy, Joseph D. Pistone, who, in case you don't know who he is, he was better known for his name, Donnie Brasco. Donnie Brasco, of course, we think of the movie with Al Pacino and Johnny Depp, and it's basically based on a true story, and Joe Pistone is here today to tell us about that true story, about a guy who infiltrates the mafia for 6 years. He dives deep into the murky world of La Cosa Nostra, and it became the basis for very, very interesting book called The Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, and another book that he wrote, Unfinished Business, that he co-wrote with Charles Brandt. In case you have any doubt, Charles Brandt is the fellow who wrote the book I Heard You Paint Houses, and I Heard You Paint Houses was the basis of the movie The Irishman. So very interesting fellow, Joe Pistone, interesting friends, and interesting that he's on Quorum Radio. I have to bring him in. Joe, I hope you're doing well in this crazy coronavirus pandemic. Thanks for coming to Quorum Radio. How you doing today?
It's like being in a can.
Oh my gosh! I mean, this is way worse than the polio scares of the 1950s. Tell us about something. I know you were born in Erie, Pennsylvania, but what was growing up in Paterson, New Jersey like?
Well, I actually was born in a little coal mining town called Robertsdale, Pennsylvania, and I don't know how that Erie. I lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, for a few years, and I think that's how that came out that I was born there. But actually, I was born in Robertsdale, Pennsylvania. But my growing up background in Paterson, you attained a lot of street smarts because I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. And in the neighborhood, there were wise guys. I mean, it wasn't any surprise to me when I got into law enforcement to work wise guys or to learn about wise guys, because I knew about them growing up. They had, there were several social clubs in the neighborhood, and as a kid, the wise guys let you hang around the social club because you were a neighborhood guy. So I knew wise guys from that aspect of growing up. So it was no big deal when I got into law enforcement to work wise guys or get to know how they acted or their mannerisms.
Sure. And that became the basis for you to be able to know how to react, how to act, what to say, what not to say, to keep quiet, and just to watch, right?
Exactly, because you're growing up in an Italian household, and you're always told you don't talk until you're spoken to, and that's one of the things in the mob is that if you're an outsider, you keep your mouth shut and you just listen. You don't get involved in conversations that you had nothing to do with, and I carried that over into my undercover activities, and that's what lent me credibility and help me proceed with my undercover activities.
Sure. And Joe, just out of curiosity, because your background is Sicilian, and I like to make the joke that because you're so punctual, Joe, that you're from your ancestors were from that part of Sicily that borders on Switzerland, because you can schedule Joe Pistone for an interview and he shows up on time, and which is kind of interesting. And I don't know if that's, let's say, a trait that you associate with mob guys. Are mob guys also very, very careful about being punctual, or is that just something that?
Well,
but not others.
I don't. Not all mob guys are. That's not in the repertoire being punctual. There are some that are, but they operate on their own time, really.
Sure.
And it's like anything else. Some guys were like, you got a guy like Sonny Black. He was a guy that was, if you had to be somewhere at a certain time, he made sure he was there. And Lester Ruggiero was the same. But then there were guys that, if it was raining out and you had, I know one time we had a meeting at night, and it was raining pretty hard, and one of the guys didn't show up, and next day Sonny Black called him out on it. He said, well, what do you want? He said, it was raining out. I didn't have any umbrella to come out of my house and go to my car. So,
well, how about that? So, So, about the mob in the United States at that time, at least back in the 70s, your Operation Sun Apple began in September of 1976. It ended in, if I'm not mistaken, July of 1981. At that time, of course, there were members of the mob who were of Italian descent and those who were of Sicilian descent. Is there much of a difference? I mean, was there a marked difference? I know that there were mob cliques and squads that were Sicilian and others that were,
with the Americans, there wasn't a difference between the American gangsters that were, descendants from Sicily or descendants from the mainland of Italy, but a very, very marked difference in the Sicilians that came over here. There was a big difference because they didn't think that the American mafia guys were tough enough as far as in their business dealings, and
right.
So there was like I know in the Bonanno family there was a faction of the Bonannos that were strictly Sicilians, from Sicily, and
right.
there was animosity between the Americans and the Sicilians, again, because the Sicilians thought the Americans were getting away from the traditions and were not enforcing all the rules and regulations that they should have been.
That you've mentioned that there's certain codes of conduct, and for mobsters, what are some of the codes of conduct that come to mind, Joe, when you think about the mob? What are they like? What are their traits? What are their customs?
Well, it's a lot of people don't realize it, but the mob does have standards, and they do have rules that you have to abide by, and some of them will get you killed, and some of them will just show a lack of respect, and they might, like they say, put you on a shelf.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things is that is your dress code. I mean, I was told, once I got accepted, I was told that be neat, keep your hair cut nice, shave that mustache off. I had a bushy mustache.
Yeah.
Shave that mustache, keep your hair neat. When we go out, in the evening, wear a sport coat. You don't have to wear a suit, but wear slacks and nice shirt, sport coat. I mean, and respect. Respect is a big thing. Whoever is above you, or another wise guy, another made guy, you have to show them respect. And you don't. One of the things that will get you killed, and you don't fool around with the made guy's wife, girlfriend, or daughter, unless you got good intentions with the daughter. I mean, and they sit you down, and once you're accepted, and you are, look, to be a member of the mafia, you got to be white, male, and Italian. So you have to go through an apprenticeship. So once you're accepted to the point where they're going to groom you to become a member, they sit you down and go over all these rules with you. And
really?
Did
that happen?
Yeah, and yes, it did. It did. And one of the big fallacies is that they tell you you should never become involved in drugs. Well,
sure.
Most of them are, because there's so much money in it. But it's still a rule that they don't want you involved in drugs. They don't want you to be a big drinker. But they break all their own rules, but they do have these rules and regulations that they go through.
So, and who was your, you were under a number of people, of mob figures. Anthony Mira, he went to jail. Then you fell into the order for a while. You were with the Jilly Greco's crew and the Colombo family.
Columbus,
that ended.
yeah.
And then you came into the orbit of Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, and then Sonny Black Napolitano. Which one of those three, or maybe all of them, were mentoring you and starting to groom you to be a made guy?
Well, basically, Lefty in the beginning. Once I started hanging around with him, after Tony Mira went back to the can, Lefty was a great mentor, teaching me and showing me the ways of the mafia, which he thought that's what he was doing. As he would say, I'm schooling you on the ways. And they don't call it the mafia, they don't call themselves the mafia. They call it the Cosa Nostra,
Sure.
And then once we got to that Sonny Black became our captain, then Sonny Black started, he started grooming me too, because he was our captain, and he's the one that, was going to propose me and did propose me for membership. So it basically started with Ruggiero, and then it carried over to Ruggiero and Sonny Black grooming me.
Sure. Now, taking a step back, what I've seen very few people ask you about is that through your period in the Navy that maybe gave you insights into gathering intel, human intel? Is that the case? I mean, was there anything that you found, insights that you obtained from the U.S. Navy? You worked in naval intelligence.
Oh,
that
yeah.
helped you later on.
Because we did. That was one of our main functions, gathering intelligence information, and a lot of it is at that time was you learn how to gather through human intelligence, and what I mean by that is by talking to people, getting
Sure.
intelligence from people that you have conversation with, and them not knowing that they're actually giving you, giving you information that is of valuable intelligence information.
Sure. And so we jump back into Sun Apple. Okay, the name of the operation that basically involved New York and Florida. It had some interesting detours. You ended up, you and one of your FBI brothers in Milwaukee got the members of the outfit in Milwaukee involved. I don't know if that, by the way, was that a satellite of Chicago? The Chicago outfit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ballestieri,
Yeah. They answered to Chicago.
Wow.
Right. Milwaukee was tied in with Chicago. Correct.
Great. And then, of course, you had an FBI colleague that then got involved in Holiday, Florida, at the club, the King's Court Bottle Club, which was also quite a coup. But if we go back just to the point when in 1976, you had already finished, I guess, in 1974, the infiltration of the truck theft ring, heavy equipment theft
Right.
ring. And how did the idea of Sun Apple come up? Whose idea was that? Was that you? Was it something that came up with members of the FBI talking back and forth? What was the genesis of that, Joe?
Well, basically, it was the gentleman by the name of Guy Barata, who was my supervisor in New York City on the truck hijack squad. The idea of Sun Apple Undercover operation was actually Guy's brainchild, and since I had just come off, an approximately 18-month undercover operation, I wasn't, that well known because I had been away from New York for 18 months. So that's why he asked me if I wanted to take on the assignment, and which I did.
At the
And the
time,
reason,
what was your initial reaction? Were you excited? Did you have a little bit of trepidation?
No, not really, because I had been involved in several undercover operations up to that time, and to me, it was just another investigation. That's all I looked at. That's all in my career I ever looked at. Undercover was just another form of investigation.
Sure. So, for the sake of those who aren't quite sure what that term means, what is a legend, Joe?
Well, what your legend is, it's who you are. It's your background. You can't go in. You can't go into undercover work, using your real name as that you use as an FBI agent, and you have to have a profession. And to have this profession, you got to have backup. You got to have you got to have a name. You got to have driver's license. You got to have a residence. Everything that people can check out. In other words, that they can go to a physical residence and determine that you live there. So that's what your legend is. It's basically who you are, what your background is, and who you are.
They chose the legend of you being a jeweler. You had quite a bit of experience in that. I think you went to formal instruction, and you also worked in a jewelry shop.
Right.
And then, of course, they drop you off at Carmela's bar in Midtown. That was the name of the place, right?
That was one of them. I mean, there were several. Yeah, there were several of them, but that was one of them. I mean, what we had a list of bars and restaurants that we knew that these individuals hung out at, and it was the idea was, with the mafia, you just don't walk into a place and say, "Hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, I'm a jewel thief, and I want to start doing business." I mean, that's not the way the mob works. Yeah. Sure. So the idea was for me to go around to these bars and restaurants and get my face seen, and hopefully get into conversation with individuals, and eventually get to a point where I can start doing business with them and let them know that that I deal in jewelry, et cetera, et cetera.
So the first person, okay, the first person really that kind of became your liaison, so to speak, was generally the bartenders, right? Or were there other people also that out of the blue just showed up and tapped you on the shoulder and introduced themselves? Or how did it happen that you started to get,
I would go to this, one place, and I finally broke the ice and start talking to this bartender, and it was like, again, and you don't introduce yourself that, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, and I deal in stolen diamonds and precious gems,
Right.
And after, I started finally, after, several months, I finally started talking to this guy and the bartender, and, it was just small talk. And then,
Sure.
And that's another thing too, is how you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself, the manner of your conversation, and I would drop hints that that he knows, hey, this guy's a street guy, because of the way he's made, his phrases and talking. So then just finally one day he asked me if I wanted to, if I liked to gamble, and I said, yeah. And he said, you want to go to an after-hours game? I said, yeah. And so I started going to this after-hours game with him, and it was all wise guys there, but he never introduced me to anybody. But I was with him, so I was okay.
Sure.
And then, after a while, then after a while, I just gave him some diamonds and said, hey, I need X amount of money for these diamonds. I never told him what they were. I just gave him a package.
Sure.
And after a while, he come back and he said, here, and then he started introducing me as Don the jeweler. And that's how I, then I met Jilly Greco. He was a Colombo. Started hanging out with them.
And so, okay, so that was Jilly Greco's crew was over in Brooklyn, right?
Right. They were Brooklyn guys, yeah.
Sure. So then, and they were like truck hijackers, thieves.
Yeah, they were basically thieves, big hijackers.
Right. And so how'd that go? Tell us about the first couple of months there. Pretty uneventful. Did you brought them some money for them because you had some stolen?
Well,
stolen
pretty. Yeah, I mean, they were, they were an active hijacking crew, and so and I would bring them around, some watches and stuff that I said that I had stolen from the airport, different airports, LaGuardia, JFK, Newark, and so that's how I got to be that I was legitimate. When I say legitimate, a legitimate thief, because I was bringing around stuff, and so I got in pretty good with them, and then I got into a beef with two guys that were in Jilly's crew that had gotten out of jail, and I got into a beef with them, and I ended up in a physical confrontation with both of them. And
which was a sit down, right, Joe?
Yeah. There was a big sit down because I had, being a jewel thief, you have to know how to get in places, and I had told them, they had several scores lined up, and I told them that, you'll never get it, you never crack that safe, or that the alarm system is too complicated, and they weren't really too pleased with me because Jilly told them what a great jewel thief I was, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So they were a little bit.
They called. Yeah, they called for a sit down, and it was like 4.5, 5 hours sit down, and finally, Jilly said, "Hey, this is over. Donnie, Donnie's been around, no problems, blah blah blah." And now I'm in a bad spot because they called me out. So, and you got to maintain your credibility and respect. So I couldn't shake their hand,
so
because then it's well, how come Donnie's not kicked off? And the only thing they would understand now is a physical confrontation. So one of the guys was a made guy, and the other guy was just an associate like me. So I clocked the guy that was an associate like me, and then we got into a big time scuffle. And then finally, they broke it up. But I knew that I couldn't hang around there anymore because, these two guys were in his crew, and the one guy was a made guy. So I just, told Jilly, I said, Jilly, no disrespect for you, but I can't come around here anymore because, it's never going to work between me and these guys. And he understood it. And that's when I started hanging out with Tony Mira, who was a banana, and who I had met. That's it just went on from there.
Sure. So the Mira was one of these guys that I guess the bartender introduced you to, or how did that happen? You guys went out. You mentioned that the bartender took you out to gamble. Did you meet Mira gambling, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I met Mira at the games, and when I went back to the games, and I started to saddle up to him and just started hanging out with him. And they went and checked me out with. They went and checked me. They went and checked me out with Jilly, and Jilly said, "Yeah, Donnie's a good guy. Never had any problem. And he told him about the beef and everything, and so that's how I got a good vouch from Jilly."
Sure. So which all begs the question, which is really key for the mafia. They're really concerned about guys who bring them money, bring them income on a steady basis.
Right.
They want that steady cash.
Exactly. It's all about earning.
So the thing is that I know you had the access to the FBI would give you, I guess seized diamonds and watches and things like that.
Right.
And later on, when you opened up the club in Holiday, Florida, it seemed like it was a legitimate money making, legitimate and illegitimate I mean, a real bona fide money-making operation that didn't require the FBI to bankroll it. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that was an undercover operation started with, before I got there. But yeah, I mean, it was a legitimate club. Everything's done, when you do these operations, everything's done legitimately, because you can't get in sideways. You can't get sideways with other government agencies like the IRS and the tax people and everything. So everything is done legit. But yeah, it was a regular operating club, and the employees were just bartenders and waitresses that just were hired, just citizens. They thought they were just working in a regular nightclub.
Right. So you look at these crew heads, these captains. I don't know if they qualify as captains or capos or what, but Jilly Greco, Tony Mira, Lefty Ruggiero, and Sonny Black Napolitano. These were all. Some of these guys were what? Were they actual captains of the mafia? Capo regimes. What were the titles?
Yeah, well, Lefty was a soldier. Everybody starts as a soldier. Once you get inducted into a family, officially inducted, you're a soldier. Everybody's a soldier. Lefty was a soldier. Tony Mira was a soldier. Jilly Greco was a soldier, but he had it, and each guy can have his own crew, and Sonny Black was a capo. Sonny Black was a captain.
Looking at these four figures, these four characters, how do you compare them? The people like Mira and Lefty Ruggiero and Sonny Black. Give me an idea. What like a profile on those people? Very different people, huh?
Yeah, very. Mira was a big drug guy. I mean, he brought a lot of money into the Bonanos through drugs. He was he was a big drug guy. Ruggiero, he ran a bookmaking operation for Nicky Marangella, who was the underboss at one time. When I first got in with the Bonanos and Ruggiero. So that's what Ruggiero did. And when I became his partner, I was, involved in the bookmaking operation with him. Sonny Black was, before he became a captain, he was a hijacker. I mean, he was he had one of the better hijacking crews in the city.
Wow.
And then after they killed Carmine Galenti was the boss of the family when I became involved with the Bonanos. And then after they killed him, Sonny Black became a captain. And he was out in Brooklyn. So now Lefty and I actually were under a captain in Little Italy by the name of Mike Sabella.
Right.
But once they killed Galenti, they knocked Mike down back to being a soldier, and Sonny Black became a captain, and they moved me and Lefty out to Brooklyn to be under Sonny Black.
Right. Okay.
Because the mafia, it has a structure. You have the boss, and then you have the underboss, and then you have the capo regimes who are captains, and then under every captain there's so many soldiers and associates, and the captains, the people under him is called a crew. That's his crew.
Sure. Right. And so when you're in your case, you were what they call an associate, I guess, right? Do they actually have? Obviously, they have an initiation for made guys, for guys who earn their button, as they say. Is there any type of a ceremony or graduation where they say, "Okay, you're now an associate," or is that just something that happens seamlessly?
Well, what happens is that you get hooked up with a soldier. In other words, an associate gets hooked up with a soldier, right? And how do you do that? Because you're a good earner. They see you're a good thief. you're a good earner. You have the ability to make money. So a soldier will, what they say is claim you.
Right.
And he'll go to his captain and say that, I claim Donnie Brasco. That means I'm with him. And what that means is that nobody else can do anything with me, and I can't do anything with anybody else unless I get his permission. So
right.
Once you're claimed, you're with that soldier all the time. That's your guy.
Right.
And then if you're white, male, and Italian, your next step is to become a made guy. So they're following you and watching you and see how good you are, see how much you a earner you are. You could even be a guy that has the ability to cultivate, politicians, judges, law enforcement.
Right.
And
Recruiter.
once they decide that they're going to induct people into the family, your captain, he's the one that proposes you for membership into the family. And what he does is he puts your name up, and then everybody gets a vote on it. We agree that Donnie Brasco can become a made guy.
Right.
And if one guy says no, then
what happens?
Then you're shot down. You're shot down. You can't make it.
Yeah. So does that mean you're kicked out, or just?
No, you're just not going to get made that time. But you can get, next time what they say is open the books, and open the books means they're going to, they're allowed to make members. Then, the next time they do that, he can put you up again, So.
Yeah. Sure. So what happened to Miro? Miro's a
the way
funny
it
guy
worked.
because he didn't get to. Did he put a claim on you formally?
No,
By going
that
to
was
somebody
his problem. No, that's where he made his mistake. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what Lefty did. Lefty was smart enough to, once Miro went to the can, Lefty was smart enough to go to, like I say, at that time, our captain was Mike Sabella. Lefty was smart enough to go to Mike Sabella and put a claim in on me. And that's
right. And so
that's why when Miro got out of the can, and he saw how tight I was with Sonny Black and everything, and thought that we were making tons and tons of money. That's why he went and put the beefs in on me, because he thought I belonged to him. But they said, hey, you never went and claimed no.
Wow. So this guy Miro was a little bit of like, I don't know if you'd say he's an outlier or somebody who's just different. Well, I mean, is it pretty accurate to say he just was not somebody who was well liked? What was he?
Yeah, he was not.
Give me the description of Miro.
Miro was a bully. I mean, Miro, wise guys didn't like Miro. I mean, he was a big guy. He was about 6'1", brawly. Really, and just mean. The guy was just plain mean. He was quick on the temper.
Explosive guy.
I can't explain it. Explosive, but just mean. Just a mean guy. Like I say, wise guys don't like him.
That's strange. He had real bad people skills, let's say. So one of the things that stands out is something I can never read.
Let's say he had no people skills, let alone bad.
Hey Joe, is it true? Is it true that you during, this is like back when Sun Apple started, like this 76, 77 was the beginning of the disco craze in New York, Saturday Night Fever.
Uh-huh.
You guys supposedly, tell me, is this for real that you guys went clubbing, bouncing around different clubs in New York?
Oh yeah.
Did that happen?
Yeah.
Did you hang out a lot with them at bars and stuff?
Yeah, but you know, a lot of it was because they were shaking the joints down. You know.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
it was basically business, all
they weren't
business.
going there to they weren't going there to dance. It was all business, you know, because you went to see how much money they were, you know, how much money they were making, and if you know, if you thought they were making more money than they were telling you, you know, then they upped the ante on the payoff, on the shakedown.
Oh, it was always over. This was a protection racket, right? They went there and said, "Look, if you don't pay, you're going to get the place
Yeah,
firebombed, or
basically.
something will happen."
Yeah. Well, not so
So
much fire bombs, but you know, just work the guys over, you know.
sure. So then, and so Mira ducks out, goes to prison. Lefty comes in. Give us a background on Lefty. You spent a lot of time in his house, didn't you?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Lefty. Lefty was Lefty was a 24/7 gangster. I mean, he had mafia running through his veins. Everything was about the mob. Everything was about the mafia. Everything was about, you know, that was him. Like I say, he was 24/7 mafia.
Now, at that time, Joe, did he earlier in his career he had a boat or something like that? I know that you guys later had a little sit down sort of when the left hand was in Newsweek, and
Right.
that raised some huge questions. It was the same boat that you rented. It looked kind of fishy, you know, no pun intended. But going back, Lefty was involved in some smuggling on his own because supposedly he had a boat. Did you ever talk about that?
Yeah,
He had a boat.
he was a boat guy. He knew boats. He was a boat guy, and always liked boats. And that's how he caught on about the boat, you know. But
So with him, how would you guys make money? What was he was supposedly not. He was kind of down and out, living in the Knickerbocker Village, the Lower East Side.
you know, down and out. You know how many wise guys lived in Knickerbocker Village?
No.
There was a ton of them. There was a ton of them living there because they didn't have to pay rent.
Right.
You know, but I mean,
Sure.
down and out. Look, they're all down, and they all cry poor mouth. I mean, well, Lefty made his money. Like I say, he was a big bookmaker. You know, he was one of the bookmakers for Nicky Glasses, who was the underboss of the family at the time.
Right. So then he had income, but what happened to it? How come he was? So wasn't he supposedly? Did he have a problem? He spent it. What was the deal?
Well,
with
he
him?
had a gambling problem. You know.
Right.
But you know, like I say, these guys always cry poor mouth that they don't have money, and they got $5,000 in their pocket. You know.
Yeah. Sure. So what kind of gigs would you do with him, Joe? What kind of money making operations did you do with Lefty? Because Lefty really appreciated you. You got it good with him, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, you know, I helped him run the gambling. We had like a confectionery store that we had on down on Little Italy, and then once I brought him into the other undercover operations, you know, he was making money. You know, he was making money from there. So
right.
You know, and
so
you know, when I bring the jewelry around and stuff.
So you were running stuff with him, and then you kept on getting the diamonds from and the watches and the jewelry to sell. Was that also a big part of it, or that it ended up becoming less important, or what?
No, that was
So
look, you always got to start bringing money in from where you said you got it from, you know.
Yeah.
So I was always,
right.
you know, always telling him I was, always bringing diamonds or watches around that I said I had got from the from scores that I had pulled. Yeah.
Did they ever have to like put you on the spot and say, Donnie, we want to do a score? I know that happened with Jilly Greco, and there's some problems, and their safes may be too difficult to crack and all. What happened with lady mobsters, that capos and soldiers that you were under? That did they ever come to you and say, hey, Donnie, we want to do this? We want to do this this heist?
No, because they would have to go through Lefty or Sonny, other gangsters that came, that wanted to do stuff. You couldn't do anything once you were claimed. You couldn't do anything with anybody unless your captain or your the soldier you were responsible to okayed it.
Right. So then you started, for a while you were Lefty, and then you gravitated towards Sonny. How'd that happen? Basically, Galante got killed, and there was
right. Well, once we grabbed you. Yeah. Once Sonny Black became captain, then they put us under him in Brooklyn. So then you have to go to Brooklyn every day. You had to go to Sonny Black's club every day, and that's how I became close with him.
Right.
So.
And he was a little bit different, right? He had his pigeons. He had his watch cartoons, right? You spent a lot of time with him in his
spent a lot of time with him, and I think one of the reasons why is that Sonny Black was stone cold. I mean, he was a stone cold killer, but give me an example with Ruggiero or say Mira, you couldn't have a normal conversation with these guys about, I don't know, about anything but
the weather,
but criminal activities, you know. But with Sonny, you can have you can have conversations about, about the politics or what was going on and
sports,
and then he loved those pigeons. So, I used to grill him a lot about the pigeons. And not when I say grill, I mean, have him teach me about pigeons and et cetera, et cetera. So it wasn't where he was 24 hours, And then we talk about the illegal activities. You talk about all the illegal activities that he had going on. And we talk about, what was going on in the mob as far as with other families and et cetera, et cetera. But
he would open up, right? He was kind of extroverted.
Yeah.
He'd tell you, he'd let you know what was going on, and that became good intel. In fact, tell us how it was that you ended up finding out about the zips and the pizza connection, right? How did that happen? You were the sort.
Yeah, he was, and so was Ruggiero, because they were a big part of the Bonanno family. That was the Sicilian faction of the family, and at the time there was a beef going on within the family, and they had to get the Sicilians on their side, even though they didn't like them. So, they would talk to me about the Sicilians and what they were involved in, et cetera, because, the Bonannos were, through Carmine Galante, they were, at the time, they were probably the biggest drug family, mafia family in the city,
Yeah, sure.
So
then,
and
right.
That's how, that's how I started to identify the Sicilians. I mean, the bureau knew, that they were Sicilian faction and everything, but they didn't know who they were. But I, through Lefty and Sonny, I was able to put names to these faces.
Sure.
And when Mira was out of the can, before he and I went sideways, I got names from him also.
Right. So then you started to see this picture emerge, Joe? You started to see that there was this thing going on with drug importation through the Sicilian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and this is over a course of what, 2 years, 3 years that you started to see this emerge? How long did it take for you to realize how huge this was?
Probably after the first year when I first started learning about it. Yeah.
So then here you are. You're sometimes with having dinner with Ruggiero's family. You apparently got pretty close to them, and then with Sonny Black. At some point, you have to say, "Guys, excuse me, I have to be excused to go back and make a phone call." I guess you had to bring your intel to the FBI. How did that work? Huh? How'd you bring your findings, all the intel to the Bureau?
Strictly, just like you said, over the telephone. I would call my contact agent and just regurgitate all the information that I had learned. Any particular day that was of importance, I would just regurgitate it over the telephone to him.
Was this like once a day, once a week?
No, it might be once every 2 days, once a week. I was never one to call just to call. If I didn't have anything that was of evidentiary value or that was of intelligence value, I wouldn't call. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So like I say, sometimes it might be 2 days in a row. Sometimes it might be once a week. Sometimes I may have gone once, gone a couple of weeks and not said anything or not called.
Right. 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 So you in the first 6 months you had expenses. You're going to the bar a lot and restaurants and right.
Yeah.
Was there a point where they said, Joe's okay, we don't have to worry about giving him any more cash. We maybe give him some diamonds, but he's pretty much his own moneymaker. Did that happen?
No, because I got money like once a month,
right.
no matter what. So
right. So you might be they meet with you, they give you diamonds, they give you rings and stuff, earrings,
right.
watches.
Yeah.
So then
if I wanted some, that when I would call my contact guy and say, hey, I'll meet you at the Museum of Natural History or the library uptown. Give me a couple watches or give me a couple diamonds, whatever,
right. So when this would happen, I mean, how would you give him did you ever give him stuff in writing at any point? Or was a lot of that done just over the phone because it's faster, to talk it instead of writing it, or what?
Oh yeah, he would reduce it to paper, because I couldn't read them all the time.
Joe, Joe, you didn't have to have a typewriter in your room, typing away furiously and.
I never kept notes. Everything was in my head. I never kept notes. Everything was in my head. You said you liked Capital White. Yeah,
it's an interesting story. And Joe, the thing that's interesting about this is that it's a natural. Right now, my son's a Marine. I think I told you. He regrets he didn't take your advice and go to. Yeah, he regrets he didn't take your advice and go to Marine Intelligence. He's like, Dad, I should have done that. I said, Nick, I don't want to run your life, So long story short, yeah, the thing is that the reason I bring up my son is that his recruiter, he and I get to be very good friends, and he told me that in the Midwest, it's really, really hard to recruit. And that also is the place that's like the one part of the country, Joe, where they have probably the worst heroin addiction. We got really bad, as you know.
Is that right?
Really bad. Oh, yeah, we have a really bad opiate problem. Now, he didn't make that connection, but I did, because I was looking at the map of how bad the opiate problem is in the Midwest. Well, it turns out that's a faithful reflection on how bad the recruitment problem is as well in the military, at least for the Marines. So,
so because of the opiates.
Because it's just so many kids. I mean, we're talking kids 14, 15 years old that are getting addicted to heroin, cheap heroin from Mexico. So, course, it's a perfect lead into Capital White. Tell us about Capital White. What's that all about? It's interesting. Interesting. It's an audiobook. It's not a print book yet, is it?
No, not yet.
Kindle?
No, we brought it on an audio first, and they were supposed to bring out the print, I think, after the summer, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and you know, and Donnie Brasco's out of the bureau, and it really doesn't have anything, you know, anything more to do with the bureau.
Right.
And
more to go.
His mentor gets killed or dies, and to the FBI, his mentor was, you know, at this time now was a administrator at headquarters, and at the funeral, two agents that worked for his mentor, Paul Wyman, come up to Donnie and say, you know, they had some suspicions about his death because of some activities that took place, how secretive Paul was a few months before he died, et cetera, and they'd like him to, you know, to do an investigation to see if there's any hanky-panky going on, and you know, and he says, well, why can't you do it? Well, because in their official capacity, they were still agents that, you know, they couldn't investigate his death because you know, it wasn't ruled a homicide.
Sure. So then it's one of those things that,
you know,
Donnie Brasco jumps in.
He jumps in and being the good investigator and that he is, it leads up until, you know, I don't want to give it away, but it leads pretty high up to some high people, and how much money there is in the opioids, and hopefully he's, you know, he might get the juices flowing again for another case.
Yeah, it's awesome. So listen, let me ask you a question. In Capital White, you go back to the mob, I guess, in a sense. Is that it? It's kind of like understood that are you completely banned and there's a bullseye on Donnie Brasco because of what happened?
No, we don't. It's not the mafia that's really involved in this operation. But he goes back to some of his old friends that he knew, you know, to give him some info, et cetera. So it's pretty interesting. It's a lot of twists and turns that the reader will really get excited about.
Now, where does it take place, Joe? Does this take place in New York, Brooklyn, California?
No, it takes place in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Capital White.
Interesting.
Capital.
Yeah. Okay. Because I thought the Capital White was I thought it had something to do, Joe, with a slang, a drug term.
Yeah. Takes place in Washington, D.C. You know, Washington, D.C., Virginia area, right. and that's, you know, that's where the government officials come in. It's more along the lines of officials, you know, wanting to know what he's doing. Government right, officials. Right. Yeah.
Right. Capital White. That's it. Okay. Capital White's available on Amazon. And so anyhow, well, listen, Joe, it's been great to have you on Quorum Radio. Capital White, the
My
new audio
pleasure.
book. And Joe, and the books that you want to, you've had a couple of books. Which are the ones that you want to promote the most?
Well, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, Donnie Brasco, and Unfinished Business, which is the second book to follow up to Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia. And I did that, with Charlie Brandt, who wrote I Heard You Paint Houses. The movie The Irishman is based on my good friend Charlie Brandt.
Oh yeah, sure.
So yeah, Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, and Unfinished Business. They're out in print.
Thanks for tuning in. Red State Radio and Quorum Radio.